Bilal Hammoud. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to my show. So Quick to Politic was a project that I came up with last year. And I said, hey, I want to start a social commentary talk show that's a webinar and maybe a podcast. And, I had maybe like one interaction. But the focus was all about history, economics, business, small business development, and of course politics. So hence the name Quick to Politic. It's all things, what ways can young folks kind of reshape America, and how can we engage in political conversations that are going to, affect change and, kind of fix systemic problems, and then just having a dialogue on politics and how can we be more interactive, how can we be more engaged as millennials, and not just millennials but everybody, and having the right conversations. But for now, I'm waving at my audience here. You guys can feel free to send any questions. It's live on Instagram, but of course it will be posted on YouTube afterwards. But without further ado, I'm going to get into our guest here. All right, Bilal Hammoud is the Public Engagement Associate for the Michigan Department of State, MDOS, and he is also an MPLP, or Michigan Political Leadership Fellow. Glee Club kind of guy, all around singing enthusiast. And, I felt like maybe we should sing a little bit of the Michigan, my Michigan. Maybe, but I noticed you were the only one. We're both in the same fellowship, and we were the only ones like singing our hearts out with this song. Public engagement with the Michigan Department of State entails. Tell us about yourself, and I'm going to stop doing all the talking.
So it's a lot. It's a lot of fun work that we get to do. I want to start off by saying thank you again for inviting me to be on the show. A lot of people talk about podcasts. It feels like everyone has an idea for one, but it takes a lot for someone to actually go out and make it happen, actualize the process, and make it about such an important topic. I think getting people involved in the politic process and bringing people into the loop is how you change the state as a whole. With the Office of Public Engagement, we focus on engaging voters down at the community level. So not just the big picture, but also down to the neighborhoods that have never been touched by a candidate. So I'll give an example with one of the projects we're working on. It's called the Voting Matters Initiative. We're looking at the lowest performing precincts in Michigan and analyzing them and understanding why, and trying to get an understanding why people aren't being civically engaged in these communities. Now, when we say lowest performing, it's talking about the percentage of people in the community that are registered to vote but aren't voting for whatever reason. This is done by looking at census data, by voting records, and in collaboration with the University of Michigan Flint, who has been helping us along the way. Now, when we, at least so far, what we've seen is a lot of people in the communities who don't vote aren't abstaining from the process because they feel as though they don't care. It's not frustration as much as it is unaware of the actual political climate and what's happening. So the dates of when an election is, how to go about voting, what is a polling location, all these questions that, if you think back, there was no instance in which you learned it all comprehensively. It was always piecemeal to you over time until you were in the loop.
Exactly.
And so
you learn a little bit about civics, but it's always like civics. I never really thought to relate that to what I did as a voter as an adult.
Right. Like the first time I learned about any of this, I was most likely in elementary school. And I can promise you, I didn't hold on to the information of how to vote for 10 years before I could actually apply it to my life. And so it took a lot of time for a lot of people to get engaged in this process. And our goal is to connect them with resources and organizations that exist so that they can be more informed voters, have an idea of what's happening around them, and have access to resources that may prevent them from being civically engaged. A lot of the times we see people aren't being engaged, because not only is it an unawareness of the situation, or a misunderstanding of the climate, but not having the time in their lives, because there are a lot of things happening, especially now around us, that are preventing us from accessing information and preventing us from being able to engage. These issues can prevent us from wanting to, or being able to have that extra time to research a candidate we might want to vote for. So part of the project is identifying those issues and taking some efforts to be able to connect communities with resources to help them. That's kind of an overview of what the Department of Public Engagement looks like, and that kind of message that we carry throughout all the work that we do.
Thank you. I'm glad you touched on the importance of just like voters being connected to resources, because there are, I kind of wanted to ask you questions about potential challenges that you in your role and with the Department of State may face with voter registration and online and absentee voting options, the whole non-face-to-face voting methods due to COVID-19, and until there is a vaccine, a lot of people are going to be somehow reticent with the idea of coming and actually touching the same voting sort of booths that everybody else is using. And so what are some opposition and what are some challenges that you're facing around proposed newer kind of regulations and new methodologies that are being touted for voters to be able to be heard and participate in post COVID-19 and in living in a COVID-19 world?
Mm-hmm. Great question. The big thing that this administration has been pushing, and obviously I don't speak on behalf of the administration, but from what I've seen, is accessibility, right? Improving the access to voting, not only during this pandemic, but across the board. And having the online voter registration and no reason absentee, and I'll dive into a little bit of what that means, as new voting rights that exist, has helped us infinitely in improving the access that people have to voting. And I actually have some good news in recent news. In our May 5th election that just passed, we were able to get a 23% voter turnout, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in a May election is actually record breaking. Mm-hmm. And this is with people who were voting at home, right? A majority of our votes came from absentee ballots rather than going to the polls. So it's showing how this kind of new wave of voting is approaching, and how absentee voting from home, is that kind of gateway to opening up the potential for people to vote from all walks of life. It is something that has been pushed to be accessible to every county, every community, and is something we'll be continuing to push. When you mention frustrations and barriers that exist, it really is the communication of it all. Making sure that if something exists, an opportunity or a resource, that people know it does. And that barrier is going to exist until we have a universal form of communication, which, we can get close and we can do our best to get there. And so I guess no matter how many great projects exist and no matter how many amazing opportunities exist, getting that information out there to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family, letting them know that, hey, you can vote from home. Hey, you should apply to this redistricting commission, which we'll talk to.
Which are going to get into.
You should be pushing to let everyone around you know, because if you know, you're privileged to understand that information, and you should be sharing that with as many people as you can.
Exactly. And I feel like in some ways it's our job as custodians of information. This is why we go into public service. This is why, I ran for office and became an elected official, because I want to be able to, pass along this information and give it to people in a way that you're not pontificating. You're not lecturing them. You're sharing information with people who are your neighbors, who are your friends. And it's a more holistic way and a more united kind of approach to sharing information with people you share community with. and kind of making sure that everybody knows in layman's terms, and then also makes them feel empowered to participate in democracy, to participate in, just sharing a government. That was actually something in the first show, that with our first guest, we talked about, ways to make people feel that they do have a voice, they do have a say, and that it's important that you engage with local politics, and that just your voice is important and your opinion should be heard. So I'm really glad that, the redistricting commission, which we're going to get to, kind of exists so that everybody can take part in democracy. Now, I did notice that the Instagram live just went nuts and froze. So I think the recorded version that we're doing now might be the only version. I have an iPhone 6 and it is recording, going live, but I think it just stopped. So it might be dead. But we'll go ahead and continue. So I did want to talk about, so you were appointed by Jocelyn Benson as the first Arab American to work in the executive office. Let's talk a little bit about being the first, and how can, in some ways, firsts sort of symbolize this desire to leave a legacy for opening doors for the next, and kind of creating this sort of sense of, all right, I'm the first and I want to, make my people proud. And then at the same time, I want to, open the doors for anyone who comes next. Tell us more about, one, your heritage and how your identity informs your sense of purpose and your sense of how you want to interact as a civil servant, representing a particular, heritage and demographic.
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, to anyone out there who is celebrating, and to all those who are not, Ramadan Kareem. This is the month of Ramadan where we are fasting and celebrating, and it has been kind of exemplative of what's happening all around us, around the world. Now, to answer your question, it's interesting. It's weird, I never really thought too much into it until one day I was realizing, I looked around and no one looked like me. No one came from the same heritage that I did. So I looked into it and I was shocked to find that I was the first. And so, it was nice to come into fertile grounds. I came into the Michigan Department of State, to the Office of Public Engagement, to a new department that had not existed prior to maybe a month to my joining the office. Mm-hmm. It was an opportunity for us to target communities that are consistently marginalized and are neglected by the system. And me coming from the position of an organizer, someone who had spent a lot of his career focused on improving people's access across the board to education, to water, and wanting to push for equal and equitable opportunity across the board.
Across the board, public health, and just for everybody to have an equal say.
Mm-hmm. And so, I guess I'll give a little bit of a background. My majors were public health and neuroscience, so I'd studied more on the research side, on the side of doing the data collection. And when I started my advocacy work, it was because I had seen all the gaps and wanting to patch them. I took the first step through advocacy and the next step through this position, because the natural transition from seeing the issues is wanting to fix the issues. And once you see the way to solution is through an administration that makes voting accessible, you want to be a part of that. And so that fertile ground that existed was targeting communities like homeless populations and immigrants and refugees and foster youth and returning citizens, and making sure that they had access to identification. It also took the form of this project where we are looking at the voting precincts in communities that tend to be neglected. Imagine this: if you are a candidate running for office And you see the data. This community votes at 5%. I'm not incentivized to go, right? You don't want to waste your time as a candidate, and not necessarily maliciously, but you have
But
to be
it's like,
strategic about your resources.
exactly. So we don't always, think about that in some ways. We want to be, candidates of the people, but in some ways, there's also strategy, and campaign advisors will tell you, like, spend more time here. This is where voters are. And it's sad that in some ways that can marginalize underestimated groups.
Right. And it's a cycle. And that grows and grows until people no longer feel represented and they become disenfranchised over time. And that is kind of the point that I'm getting to here is I feel like the Arab American community has felt that marginalization for years. And that has affected the way they vote. And we saw that in this most recent primary, record-breaking numbers in Arab American turnout. They felt inspired. They felt more included in the system. And we've seen Arab Americans getting more involved in the voting process and in the election process and just in the process. And I think that's been an inspiring feat for Arab Americans of all descents, whether you were born here or came here. And that's kind of why I really value this position and this opportunity, because it shows that we are in places that matter and we're taking efforts to make sure everyone is included, because I know what it's like to come from a family that has never really believed in the system, right? We come from a government, I come from Lebanon, and my family was born in a government that everyone knows and feels a certain way about, but they didn't really believe in voting and didn't see the results. And so coming here, you didn't expect them to feel any different.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, could you repeat yourself?
Oh, no, not knowing if it was really going to make a difference, showing up to vote, and, because whoever is in power may just, assume power and stay there. And so who knows if, you're actually going to be heard, and that therefore that trust isn't there.
And democracy exists over there. The democratic process is strong, but here we have such an opportunity to make a difference, especially at the local level, especially when you see city council people and local elected officials who make the real difference in your day-to-day life. And it's connecting those council folk, those elected, with those people who don't vote and showing them why their vote matters. That's a big part of kind of connecting the system with a face, right? Jocelyn Benson, our current Secretary of State, has been taking huge efforts to make sure that that connection is made. And it's been really nice because I came on in the first couple of months as the first Arab American. And then more recently, we also got, I say more recently, but time has been flying. In the last couple of months, we've also gotten someone else, Zainab Hussein, who came from Wayne County, who has been another Arab American to join the team. And it has been a huge help. And it has been absolutely incredible to have this just powerhouse of an administration pushing through all these initiatives to make sure that access and democracy is there. So coming from my background, I see the efforts being taken and I appreciate them. And I'm glad to be part of that. And I by no way ever see myself as a trailblazer in this, but I want to be a part of the solution. And that's what my job is.
Awesome. Yeah. It's almost like, you have multiple perspectives, and, everyone's voice can now be heard in more than just like a symbolic way. It's more effective, and everybody has a seat at the table. So I think that's true democracy. You're hearing every perspective. Thank you for that amazing answer and great insight into like your background, heritage, and your passion and drive for politics, and just figuring out conundrums and helping everybody get to a solution. I wanted to also talk about the redistricting commission and getting back to that. We talked about it a few times, but tell us a little bit more about the application process, why we need to have redistricting commissions in the first place that are bipartisan, and that how the history of gerrymandering has created a need for this citizen committee.
So The Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission was an effort that was made possible by a group named Voters Not Politicians. In 2018, they had worked to push through a ballot initiative, which is basically a ballot led by the people for the people, so that the way that district lines are drawn, the way that your state house, state senate, and congressional representatives are elected can be decided not by the legislators themselves, but by independent citizens, a bipartisan commission that exists to make sure that communities are represented. Now, this was done in 2018, past November, and it was astonishing. Over 65% of people had voted for this, which means that the state came out in droves and truly agreed that we didn't want gerrymandering to be a part of the state. Now, gerrymandering is a process of cracking and packing communities, which basically means you're putting communities together that look the same and excluding communities that don't, so that you can control power regardless of the population of your base.
So in other words, it guarantees that, oh, well, everyone's going to vote this way for this party is going to win because all the constituents are going to, look heavily like this particular voting demographic. So it's a way to kind of rig the system in your favor.
Right. And that's bad across the board, because that not only puts funding at risk for communities, it jeopardizes the opportunity, it jeopardizes what resources they have access to, but it also means that incumbents can get elected without necessarily, not incumbent, the candidates can get elected without any competition. And I think one of the most unhealthy things you can have in an election is a non-competitive one, right? Yeah. At that point, it becomes very problematic because that means the candidate doesn't need to put all the effort into that community.
Right.
So what does this commission do, and what does it actually mean? So every 10 years, district lines are redrawn, and every 10 years, it's done during the census. So now, instead of the legislators deciding, it'll be up to this commission. Now, how this commission is selected is where the Secretary of State comes in. There is a random selection process. We'll get that out of the gate because it is an open opportunity for anyone to apply. That means no matter where you come from or what you look like, you have the opportunity to apply and a chance to get in. So any Michigan registered voter can apply for this. That's the big takeaway here, is you can apply, and the deadline is June 1st, so it's coming up quick. So this commission will be comprised of 13 individuals, 4 of which who are Republican or identify with the Republican Party, 4 of which who are Democrat or identify with the Democratic Party, and 5 of which who identify as unaffiliated. Now, in Michigan, it's nice because you don't have to identify with a political party no matter what. So you could have voted one way your entire life. You don't have to identify with that political party. Mm-hmm. It's a benefit to not being labeled and having the opportunity to vote however which way you please. Now, the commission itself is going to be a group of 13 who has its own autonomous power. It's legislative power to draw these districts. And it doesn't come lightly. You get compensated $40,000 to be a commissioner. You get to set your own schedule. You get to travel the state. And you get about a $4 to $4.5 million budget to work with. So you're really given a lot of resources to make sure that this is done right and that communities are represented. You can take in input from your neighborhoods, from everyone you know, to know what your community might look like, their idea of what their community looks like, and truly make these elections competitive, fair, and representative. It's honestly a historic opportunity because it is the second time in U.S. history and the first time in Michigan history anything like this has been done.
Mm-hmm. When was the first time that it ever happened? Like, do you recall what state? Because this is, to me,
sorry, say that again.
To me, this is kind of trailblazing. It's amazing, and to know that it happens somewhere else as well.
Yeah, I mean, all eyes are in Michigan in 2020 for many reasons. The presidential election, all our new voting rights, but also this commission will decide a lot of will change the way a lot of things are represented. So the first time this was done was in 2010 in California. So they have their own commission. Their commission actually came to Michigan a couple times, and they do this traveling roadshow where they give their experience being commissioners, and it's really cool. It's interesting to hear what their process looked like and hear them talk about what their experience was. Here in Michigan, we hope to take what they had done for their application process and improve upon it and make it more accessible to people who wanted to apply from all walks of life. So the application's online. It's about a 10 to 15 minute application, really simple. And the application requires you to get it notarized to just attest to everything you filled out. And we've made that even more accessible initially by opening up the branches. All of our 131 branches were offering free notarization, but now also offering it, because the branches are closed, online. So now it's a service that's available for free online for anyone. So you can fill out the application online, get it notarized online, and submit it online. And that's the most accessible way to, like, it blows my mind how accessible we've made this, and I absolutely love it. This commission, again, a historic opportunity for everybody. It is going to change Michigan, and I think everyone should apply for it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, for this to only be in 10 years, this is the second time it's happened in the country. It's amazing, because everybody then has a stake, and I think everybody should adopt, a sort of system like this, so that you don't have gerrymandering that can, negatively impact, communities. So in some ways, when you look at educational statistics, it shouldn't, matter, in the wealthiest country in the world, where, who's situated in what zone and who votes for, which candidate, and, how much campaigning, how much harder you're going to work as a candidate for your people based on, where they are and who they vote for. And so it doesn't make sense. And I think this is the right move to make, to change something that, in some ways it should have changed a while ago. And hopefully, we get a lot of people who are, just amazing bipartisan social justice warriors who are, just in it for the right reasons, and, going to reshape Michigan. So thank you so much for shedding some light on that. And folks, you heard it here on Instagram Live. Go and apply if you are interested. June 1st is the deadline. So that kind of leads me into some of our final questions. So we talked about, just the coronavirus has kind of led to exposure in, and this is kind of like more for you as a person, not necessarily wearing your work hat. I think the coronavirus has kind of shed some light on issues that have to do with unemployment, paid sick leave in the country. You look at Europe, you look at, a lot of other wealthy industrialized nations, and, people are not necessarily being left out to dry in some ways. Without the government intervention directly, kind of like, we've done some things, but I in some ways, we need to do more. And I think the coronavirus has exposed sort of some of the cracks in the system, for just doing more to alleviate, inequalities and, socioeconomic gaps and things of that sort. What do you think we can do as a society to work harder to make sure that, we work to update some of these outdated systems? For example, you hear stories about people applying for unemployment, and the phone lines aren't really enough to help everybody, and then the websites are outdated. And so how can we make all of this better? How can we improve the lot of everybody, now that we've seen that everybody is going to need to have some sort of help?
Well, let me just give you a quick solution to the world's problems real quick.
And of course, people here will kind of see it right here. We don't have all the answers, but hey, it's brainstorming over coffee.
That's fair. I will say that the biggest thing we can do as a people, in my opinion, is just work together and stick together and understand that we're in it not as family by family, person by person, but truly as Michigan as a state, but as an entire community. We are here and we're fighting this thing all at once. It's weird because it's the first time in history anything like this is going to
Yes.
have existed for us to all have a common enemy, a common goal to survive and to make sure that everyone has access to resources that are going to basically determine whether they survive and have the resources they need to make it through this.
Survive and thrive. It's funny because you think about like the silent generation or the greatest generation. They went through World War II. That's when they were being born, and so their parents have memories of the Depression and other catastrophic events. And I feel like in some ways we didn't really have these sort of, for other generations, baby boomers, Gen Xers, us millennials. We haven't had that life defining cathartic kind of experience that can bring us all together. And I think this is kind of the closest that those generations will really get to that one defining event that brings us that sense of togetherness.
I don't know if I want one, if it's always going to turn out in this sort of negative fashion.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And I mean, like, because there are definitely, it's sad that so many, just so many people have had to suffer. And, and of course, like, it's something that nobody really would have foreseen. And I think because we live in a world where these kind of things don't necessarily happen, we don't live in a world of like world wars anymore, or, the last time we saw something like this was, 1918. And so even then, people just kind of, oh, well, it's not going to be that bad. None of us could have foreseen that this would have gone worldwide and, maybe an epidemic, but not a pandemic. And in the past, when we've had scares like Zika and swine flu and Ebola, it never was as far reaching as this. And so I think I really wanted to, re-explore having these political conversations because of the fact that we're now living in a new normal, and we've gone through and are in the midst of something that is unprecedented, and we have never experienced anything like this. Multi-generational kind of like first time, what are we going to do? So I think it's just important to at least start having those conversations. And, that kind of leads into like one of my last questions, which is, what will the new normal be, and how can, we just kind of imagine, so many people are suffering, and, how can we pivot, until a vaccine is found, and how can, you with your background in public health and, just understanding how, people can, understanding just like the essence of what it means to protect people, what it means to watch out for people, and how can we smoothly transition, help people pivot, and reopen the country? Like, what are your thoughts on that process?
It's a great question and a great point. I think the big thing here to take into consideration is there isn't going to be a return to norm that we all want. The norm that we have lived with and the norm that will continue going forward are going to be drastically different until the coronavirus has at least a vaccination available to them, available for public consumption. It is going to be difficult to host public events and have huge gatherings without having that lingering concern in the back of your mind that you have to be careful. And I think a big thing that a lot of public health advocates have pushed for, and that I would agree with, is patience. Is understand this isn't just a 1 to 2 month thing, and just be able to work through the restlessness that we're all facing right now. The weather's getting nice. A lot of states are reopening. Florida reopened its beaches, and I, for one, want to go down real bad. But we have to understand that just because you want it to be over doesn't mean this virus is over yet. And we have to be patient and look towards our administration, who across the board have been doing great jobs to make sure that everyone is protected and everyone has access to the resources they need and connect with their community. I mean, I call up my friends on video chat like this all the time, and we have conversations that go for hours. And it's what keeps me sane. You know, do some yoga, some meditation, whatever gets you through the day, and just wait it out, because together is the only way we make it through this, and together is what the state needs.
Yes, yes. So I want to thank you so much for all of your words of wisdom, and I generally like to, you know, have something that, you know, folks, just some nugget of inspiration that has gotten you through stressful times, uncertain times, and anything you want to impasse to people. And also I feel like the underlying theme of like everything we talked about was you have a voice and you can be heard. So what would you want to tell viewers or anybody out there looking to become that person who, you know, uses their voice and gets involved in just civically engaged and become a person who is more forward thinking and realizing that they have the power to go out and impact change?
I will say a repetitious voice grows exponentially.
I like that. That is perfect.
The more you push through something you care about, and the more you stay involved, and the more you show your passion for something, the stronger of an effect it will have. So the first time it may not take effect, but keep pushing, because everyone has the opportunity to make a sound.
All right. I love that. Okay, so one more time. It was a repetitious voice.
I don't know. I made it up on the spot. We're going to have to go back and just look through the video.
No,
you can just revert.
But I the essence of it is just like keep repeating. And I think I said this to someone else recently, where it's just like sometimes I feel like, oh, am I out there doing too much? Am I saying too many things? Are people going to get, it's like, well, if you have something positive to say, you know, it's not like I'm, you know, a Kim Kardashian or anyone. Not to say that any of those people are irrelevant, but some celebrities are just like, I'm out here, I'm doing not a lot of stuff. But, you know, if you're...
it's a repetitive voice.
Exactly. And it might as well stand for something that's going to, you know, be that much more impactful. But on that note, I really, really want to thank you. And, you know, thanks for this engaging conversation. And, you know, I look forward to following how the redistricting commission reshapes Michigan. And, you know, just keep up the good work, being that amazing advocate that you are out there in the community. And I look forward to our political leadership meetings. And so, yes. Thank you for being my guest, and have a great one.
Thank you again for having me. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your Ramadan, and have a great rest of your COVID experience.
All right. Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you. Ramadan Kareem.